When the House Oversight Committee finally dropped more than 20,000 pages of Epstein-related documents, Washington totally froze. After years of rumors, political fights, and secret court filings, the public is finally getting a look at what people had been whispering about for years, who Jeffrey Epstein actually talked to, emailed, and tried to influence.
Tonight, in newly released emails, ex-offender Jeffrey Epstein repeatedly discussing Donald Trump, shedding new light on their long friendship, and seeming to suggest Trump had information he never shared. In a 2011 exchange with his co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein writing the, quote, dog that hasn't barked is Trump.
According to the Democrats, the public deserves to see everything about the people governing them, especially their president. No more secrets. No more cherry-picked documents, no more protecting powerful people. But the thing is, the moment the files were released, the whole thing turned into a political storm. Democrats had already shared 3 emails from Epstein that mentioned interactions with Donald Trump. Republicans fired back by dropping thousands more pages and accusing Democrats of selectively leaking emails to create a fake narrative to smear President Donald Trump. Trump denied everything and called the whole thing a distraction, and even called Marjorie Taylor Greene a traitor for wanting to release the Epstein files amid speculation that he could be party to Epstein's horrific crimes.
Now to the escalating war of words within the GOP over the Epstein files. President Trump sparring with one of his most loyal allies, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, calling her a traitor in a social media post. Greene firing back as a critical vote on the Epstein files is set for Tuesday. ABC's senior White House correspondent Selena Wang reports from Washington.
Tonight, just days before the House is set to vote on releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, President Trump ramping up attacks on one of his closest allies. Trump declaring he's withdrawing his supported endorsement of Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of 4 Republicans who joined Democrats to force that vote. Trump accusing Greene of betraying the entire Republican Party, calling her a ranting lunatic and a traitor. Greene firing back, questioning why the president is fighting so hard to stop the files from being released.
The president even suggested he'd be open to backing a challenger to her seat in Congress.
I'm no longer much of a fan.
Greene punching back today in a series of social media posts saying, quote, I never thought that fighting to release the Epstein files, defending women who were victims of rape, and fighting to expose the web of rich, powerful elites would have caused this. But here we are. The firebrand conservative has been a steadfast supporter of the president, often appearing by his side at campaign events.
We're going to re-elect our favorite president, the greatest president in United States history, Donald J. Trump.
He is charming. He is able to convince people. So he tells everybody what they want to hear.
So how do you know this?
That was supposed to show you.
He has a sense of humor. He can be funny.
He's great. His ability to sell. It's very much like Clinton. Both Bill and Donald have the ability to go over to a fat, ugly woman, say, you are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. So you probably know he had a scalp reduction. Because he had the same male pattern movement that we all have. He's not a horrible human being. He does nasty things to his best friends' wives. Anyone who first tries to gain your trust and then uses it to do bad things. That's how we go.
But the truth sitting in the documents was bigger than any political team. The emails showed Epstein didn't stick to one side. He reached out to everyone: Republicans, Democrats, famous academics, media people, billionaires, and celebrities. He lived in every circle at once. One of the biggest names in the documents was Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary and president of Harvard. The emails show he talked with Epstein for at least 7 years.
This is an actual email composed and sent by Larry Summers, former president of Harvard University, former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, and former director of the National Economic Council. Not only did he have multiple email exchanges with Jeffrey Epstein, at least one of which was essentially asking him for dating advice, but imagine even receiving an email like this. It's hard to make heads or tails out of what's being said here. SoftBank deputy guy I liked and seemed aware and honest regarding son. Lots of slathering to Saudis. I yipped about inclusion. I observed that half the IQ in world was possessed by women without mentioning they are more than 51% of population. I guess he wants a pat on the back for that. Mnuchin plumbs new depths. War seems more likely than I used to think. DJT is world's luckiest guy in terms of opposition, economy, etc. Still think his world will collapse. I'm trying to figure why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard, but hit on a few women 10 years ago and can't work at a network or a think tank. Do not repeat this insight sent from my iPad. This is almost as bad as reading a transcript of one of Trump's speeches, except for Larry Summers was, I guess, tapping this out on his iPad. I want to talk very briefly about two things in this email. The first is the comment about women's intellectual capacity. Some of you may recall that in 2005, when he was president of Harvard, he made comments at a conference that was about women and minorities in science, in which he basically said that women have less innate capacity for science, and that is why there are less women than men in science. These remarks were met with quite a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, and ultimately led to his resignation from that post. In 2005, I was a medical student at a place called Stanford University. I had graduated from college with a degree in biomedical engineering with a 3.97 GPA. I remember him making those comments and being absolutely livid that he suggested that someone like me could not succeed in science when I was doing that exact thing. Not only that, but there were many women at his own institution excelling in science. And here he was in 2017 still getting digs in at the expense of women. The other point I want to raise here is when he talks about this section, which is essentially him whining about cancel culture. I want to point out that this man went on to be the director of the National Economic Council after he left Harvard. He continues to be extremely prominent. He holds an endowed chair at Harvard University, and he is whining to a file about cancel culture. As if that weren't bad enough, here he is in 2019 asking Jeffrey Epstein for advice on this situation. Pause to read. And yeah, he was married at that time, at least according to Wikipedia. Still is, apparently.
Summers also made comments about women that he told Epstein not to repeat, saying, "Do not repeat this insight." Then there was author Michael Wolff, who Epstein emailed for advice about stories involving Bill Clinton, Stephen Hawking, and others. Epstein wrote, "Clinton was never ever there, never." When Epstein heard Reuters was preparing a story involving Trump, Wolff told him, "Let me know if there's anything I can do." See, the thing is, Epstein reportedly believed he had the dirt necessary to take Trump down, and he was shaping up to do exactly that.
K-File, unearthing new and incredibly revealing details about Jeffrey Epstein and his opinions of Donald Trump, someone that Epstein once called his closest friend for 10 years. The emails and text messages show that Epstein continued to be focused on Trump when he became president, questioning his sanity, psychoanalyzing him as someone who feels alone and might, quote, crack, even suggesting without explanation in one email, quote, "I am the one able to take him down." Obviously, in the context of all of this, you want to know more there, but we don't have the context. The two men, of course, were once extremely close. Several associates of both of them have told us over the past year that they were the best of friends.
Epstein kept bringing up Donald Trump long after Trump said their friendship had ended. His private comments about Trump were, for the most part, remarkably negative and harsh. And he sort of often cast himself as someone who understood the former president's mindset. Now, in messages in 2017 and 2018, he described him as, quote, "effing crazy." You can see it right there, speculated he might have early dementia, called him a maniac, borderline insane. There was something where he compared him to a mob boss. There was something where somebody messaged him and said, "Trump is truly stupid," to which he replied, "Duh." So, you know, one of the emails that we found that was very interesting was this one to Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, in which Epstein harshly described Trump, writing, quote, "I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump, not one decent cell in his body, so yes, dangerous."
There were also messages with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the former prince. Epstein forwarded him a Daily Mail story about allegations, and Andrew replied, "What? I don't know any of this. How are you responding?" Epstein reassured him, even cracking a dark joke. The only person she didn't have sex with was Elvis. And here's a big one. Epstein even emailed billionaire Peter Thiel, CEO of Palantir, writing, Deck visit me, Caribbean. Thiel replied politely, but denied ever going.
It was good to see that Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, who's currently on a tour talking about the Antichrist everywhere, and Steve Bannon were all listed in this.
You know what the craziest it is? I saw this clip from Joe Rogan recently. I forget exactly what I was watching. I was watching someone on YouTube. Talk about Peter Thiel, and they unearthed a clip from fairly recent, maybe, where Peter Thiel went on Joe Rogan. Thiel was like, yeah, I knew Jeffrey Epstein. Like, I have connections to him. And Joe Rogan was like, oh yeah, before he was arrested, right? And Peter Thiel was like, no, I hung out with him after he was arrested and was like a known.
I met Epstein a few times as well, and I think.
How'd you get introduced?
It was Reid Hoffman in Silicon Valley introduced us in 2014. But it was basically I didn't ask enough questions about it. I think there were sort of a lot of things where it was fraudulent. I do think Epstein knew a lot about taxes.
And you were introduced to him. How was he described to you?
He was described as one of the smartest tax people in the world.
Interesting.
And I probably was my moral weakness that I.
Well, how could you have known back then? He had never been arrested.
No, this was 2014. It was post arrest.
Oh, so his arrest was the first arrest, right?
Yeah,
which was like
2007, 08.
Okay. And it's like, what do you mean? Why would you admit that you actively still hung out with him after he was a convicted? This is crazy.
Thiel, in particular, has long been speculated to be a big asset of the Israeli lobby in America. And considering how Epstein is also strongly suspected to be a Mossad agent, it makes sense that the two would be so close even after Epstein's conviction. Whitney Webb is a very well-respected investigative journalist who specializes in reporting on the military-industrial complex and the elite class in America. And here she is talking about how Peter Thiel is the man behind J.D. Vance's recent push to the top, too.
Really, the name that's most important as it relates to Vance is going to be Peter Thiel. As people have noted, Vance worked at Mithril Capital, where Mithril, by the way, a big investor in the stablecoin issuer Paxos, which plays a pretty big role in the piece we'll be discussing later. And from Mithril, he went on to be involved with some of these other VC funds, one tied to an AOL co-founder, one of them receiving a lot of money, this Rise of the Rest fund. It was heavily funded by people like Jeff Bezos and the Walton family from Walmart, who, if you're familiar with the Waltons, are very tied up historically with the Clintons, specifically Hillary. And then, from there, he's his political career, a lot of Thiel involvement. Once again, a lot of donations from Thiel and other members of the so-called PayPal mafia, like David Sachs and Elon Musk, of course. Being a big, part of the fundraising apparatus, as are some other companies that Thiel helped create, like Palantir, which is now part of this super PAC with the Winklevoss twins and Elon Musk. And then you also have Joe Lonsdale, who's a Palantir co-founder with Peter Thiel, joining that.
Whitney then went on to explain why this is extremely bad news for Americans, talking about how Peter Thiel and Palantir are trying to develop surveillance programs for the military to keep its own citizens on a leash.
Why is this bad? I could probably go on a rant for a very long time about Peter Thiel, so I'm just going to try and condense it. I've been reporting on him and specifically on Palantir for a very long time. If I would encourage people to look at those reports, because it's very clear that Palantir was expressly created by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp to be the privatization of this program they tried to launch after 9/11 at DARPA that was called Total Information Awareness. Pretty sure, Marty, we've discussed it before. And Total Information Awareness was basically to create a giant data mining operation that would be combined with artificial intelligence for the purpose of basically creating a pre-crime society, not just predictive policing, but also predicting pandemics before they happen. And bioterror attacks and terror attacks before they happen. And since then, it's been, privatized as Palantir. Palantir's done all of those things. During COVID, they were trying to predict COVID outbreaks before they happened by surveilling wastewater in conjunction with HHS. They've done predictive policing programs all throughout the United States. They're a contractor with pretty much every intelligence agency. Their only client until 2008 was the CIA. Palantir engineers in the early years of the company made over 200 visits to CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Alex Karp said on record the CIA was always the intended client.
So, yeah, some very powerful people who used to be close friends with Epstein are deciding the lives of Americans from the shadows, with Peter Thiel being one of the most prominent. Powerful people across politics, media, and business emailed Epstein like he was part of their world, giving advice, asking for guidance, reacting to scandals, even joking. The documents didn't reveal one villain. They revealed how connected Epstein truly was.
Said on social media that he had directed Attorney General Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, quote, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, J.P. Morgan Chase, unquote, because he went on to say all, quote, arrows are pointing to the Democrats, unquote. Wait, what arrows? What investigation? The July 7th memo made clear, as I just read, there were no arrows, and all investigations had led to the same conclusion. Let me repeat it, quote, we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties, unquote. Today, Bondi said she'd already assigned the investigation to prosecutors in New York. Does that mean they missed something before? They didn't do their jobs? That the DOJ blundered on one of the highest profile investigations of this year? Is this an investigation or a diversion? Sifting the government's own statements and actions makes it very hard to tell. What we do know is Epstein's victims are where they have always been, persistently seeking all the government knows and has yet to reveal or act upon. Many sent an open letter to Congress today about future consideration of a bill to demand release of all the Epstein files, which doubtless will include information about convicted accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. That letter to members of Congress reads in part, there is no middle ground here. There is no hiding behind party affiliation. Epstein and Maxwell's crimes exposed a double standard of justice where rich and powerful men and women evade repercussions.
Even when the public demanded answers for his sudden death, officials kept offering excuses. First, they said he was under heavy watch. Then they quietly admitted he wasn't. Then they claimed the cameras failed, but never explained how every camera near his cell broke at once. Then they said the guards fell asleep. And the truth is, nobody believes the official story. Not even Epstein's own family.
I've been speaking to Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark. He believes his brother did not take his own life in the Metropolitan Correction Center in New York, that in fact, he was killed.
Well, the first time he told me he was getting in trouble, that was back in 2006. He asked me to come talk to him. We were both in New York at the time, and he told me he was getting into trouble because he was with girls that were too young. He said he was stupid. He realized he was stupid, and he wanted me to hear it from him as opposed to, on the news or something.
What was your reaction when he told you?
Well, yeah, I was surprised. I didn't really say much because what's to say? I mean, he told me what was going on, and I just accepted that. And, I knew whatever he did, I believe in. Even though he's my brother, I always believe in, consequences and ramifications for your actions. So if he's going to get in trouble, he was going to have to deal with it.
And so what do you think happened to him then? He was arrested, he was in prison, and then he died. What do you think happened to him?
Well, when I first heard that he was dead, in the government report, it said that they notified me. They didn't notify me. I heard it on CNN. And it said Jeffrey Epstein was found dead from an apparent suicide, in his cell. And I figured, well, I had no reason to doubt it. I thought he decided to take himself out. I wasn't keeping track of, his case on a daily basis, but I knew that he was facing a potentially long term in jail, and I know he wouldn't want to live that way. So I just assumed, okay, there was no reason to doubt it. He took himself out, and I respected that decision. But then the next day, I had to go back to New York early to identify his body because I'm the next of kin. And then they did an autopsy, which they always do. And they both came out of the autopsy saying they couldn't call it a suicide because It looked too much like a homicide. And that doesn't appear in any of the records, or nobody talks about that the two pathologists, two highly qualified pathologists, said this looks more like a murder.
But there was a major investigation into his death, which concluded that it was suicide. Have you got any evidence?
Wait, I have to interrupt you there. They said there was a thorough investigation, but they've given no proof of that. It was never, as far as I know, it was never investigated as a potential homicide. Because if it was, there's a lot of things they should have done that were not done.
Questions about the prison guards and other inmates add to the uncertainty. Official explanations didn't account for other prisoners on the same tier or the mysterious identities of guards. Critical details remain unknown even years later, fueling suspicions that there was more going on than anyone admitted.
You seem to be suggesting there was some sort of conspiracy. So who do you think might have been involved in your brother's death?
Well, I don't think that one of the prisoners did it on his own accord, because if that was the case, they would have found out who it was and prosecuted him. So if Jeff was just, willy-nilly killed by another inmate, there's no reason for any cover-up. There's no reason for any, for all this nonsense that's going on.
Instead, the theory gaining attention is that his death may have been connected to the sensitive information he held, information that could have embarrassed or endangered some very powerful figures.
Information. Do you think your brother had information? Knew things about powerful people that would have embarrassed them, potentially led them to be in the same position as he was in prison, and that was the reason?
I believe so, yes.
And what about the situation we've seen?
Jeffrey mentioned he had dirt on people. He didn't tell me what he knew, but he said, he led me to believe that he had, dirt on people.
Did he tell you who he knew things about?
Well, in the 2016 election, we were talking about the election, and Jeffrey told me that if he said what he knew about the candidates, they would have to cancel the election. That's a quote. That's exactly what he told me. He said, if I said what I knew about the candidates, they'd have to cancel the election. He didn't tell me what he knew, but that's what he said.
Well, clearly Donald Trump was one of those candidates. Tell us about the relationship as far as you understood it. How close were your brother Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump?
They were very close. They used to fly in each other's planes. Donald Trump was in Jeffrey's office many times, and there's witnesses that could testify that they saw Trump in Jeffrey's office. So I don't know why he said he was never in Jeffrey's office. That's just a blatant lie. I couldn't believe he actually said that, because it's so provable that he was there.
The celebrities connected to him only added more fuel. People mentioned names like politicians, CEOs, scientists, actors, big figures who visited him, talked to him, or flew on his plane. There's this one really interesting Joe Rogan podcast with Elon Musk from a few months ago that, in hindsight, seems to be a goldmine of information now that we look back on it. What did these two know?
You should have asked if Epstein killed himself.
Yeah, that's the Cash Patel
where's
thing
the
with
camera?
Cash Patel
Where's
and
it?
Dan Bongino,
Where's the
and they were
camera?
trying to convince everybody of that. Like, okay.
The guards weren't there, and the camera stopped working, and
the guards were asleep. The cameras weren't working. He had a giant steroided up bodybuilder guy that he was sharing a cell with that was who was a bad cop. Like, all of it's kind of nuts. Yeah. All of it's kind of nuts. Like, that he would just kill himself rather than reveal all of his billionaire friends.
Yeah.
And then...
Did you see Tim Dillon talking to Chris Cuomo about this?
I did. Chris Cuomo just looked so stupid.
Tim just listed off all the...
and he's like, I agree, it is strange. Like, of course it's strange, Chris. Jesus Christ. You can't just go with the tide. You got to think things through. And if you think that one through, you're like, I don't think he killed himself. Nobody does. You'd have to work for an intelligence agency to think he killed himself.
It does seem unlikely.
It seems highly unlikely. highly unlikely. All roads point to murder.
Yes.
Point to they had to get rid of him because he knew too much. Whatever the fuck he was doing, whatever kind of an asset he was, whatever thing he was up to, it was apparently very effective.
Yes.
And a lot of people were compromised.
Then they went even deeper into who Epstein might have been working for. Then later, Joe even talked to Danny Jones about who Epstein really was in the shadow of his public crimes.
Let me just get real and
What
say,
do you, if I gun to your head, what do you think your best assessment of what Epstein, who was Epstein, who was he working for?
well, I don't know, right? So I'm just guessing. Everybody wants to say he was working for the Mossad. He very well could have been. He could have been working for the CIA. He could have been a guy who was on his own, but also working with them, right? Like a guy that they used, but they never fully endorsed.
Like an asset?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a guy who could move money around.
Right.
He definitely...
Good at laundering money.
The moving money around stuff was very weird because he had money through no way that anybody could ever explain.
Yeah.
He had an enormous amount of money through no way that nobody could ever explain. Which, you know, if you're state-funded, you're funded by Israel, and Israel's funded by America, and, you know, there's also NGOs and nonprofits, and there's ways to move money around where you can give this guy money.
Yeah.
So he was like... Weinstein, who is an economist, right? Weinstein's a legitimate mathematician.
Eric?
Yeah. So when Eric met him, his first inclination was he was a fraud.
He's a construct.
Yeah, a construct. And did he tell you the whole story about the girl sitting on his lap?
Yep.
He was obviously nerd fishing. He was fishing
Yeah.
for nerds. And I think he
Yeah.
caught a lot of nerds in that net. There's a lot of those guys
100%.
that wound up going to that island. They probably thought, this is great. We get to party.
Nothing's free.
And they probably felt like they were rock stars because they get to hang out with the intellectual elite on an island with a guy who's just a billionaire philanthropist who's eccentric, who just loves women. He's a professed bachelor. And it all seemed too good to be true.
It's so true.
Because it was.
Yeah.
So I think he was an asset. Whether or not it was for the Mossad strictly, or Israel strictly, or the United States strictly, whether it was a CIA thing, whatever, I don't know. But I think it was probably a part of a blackmail compromise effort.
And when someone holds that kind of information, can we really ever trust our governments to be honest with us? Do you think the Epstein files have more to tell us? How do you see this ending? Let us know in the comments below.